Google knows what you searched for last night. God knows why you searched for it. And according to both the Bible and the Quran, that difference between knowing the data and knowing the source code is everything. Because what I'm about to show you suggests that you've never had a private thought in your entire life. Right now, you probably think you're pretty smart. You can Google the capital of any country. You can watch tutorials on how to fix anything. You carry the sum of human knowledge in your pocket. And because of this, we've developed a very specific kind of modern arrogance. We confuse access to data with possession of wisdom. We assume that if we can just gather enough facts, we can solve every problem, cure every disease, and fix the human condition. But both Christianity and Islam open with a humbling reality check. They argue that human intelligence, no matter how advanced, is like looking at the world through a straw. We see a tiny circle of reality, while the all-knowing sees the entire landscape. And here's the part that's going to mess with your head. What God knows about you is so specific, so intimate, that it would terrify you if you saw the file. Let me show you what I mean. Here's a question that should humble you. Where were you when the universe began? Did you design gravity? Did you calibrate the speed of light? Did you write the code for photosynthesis? No. Then maybe, just maybe, you don't know as much as you think you do. In the book of Job, chapter 38, verse 4, we find perhaps the most intense intellectual dressing down in history. Job has been questioning the fairness of the universe, demanding answers. God finally answers him out of a whirlwind, not with an explanation, but with a question that shatters human ego. Where were you when I laid the earth's foundation? Tell me if you understand. The text here is establishing a hierarchy of competence. It's saying that the architect does not owe the brick an explanation. The wisdom that designed the cosmos operates on a level of physics and morality that the human brain simply isn't wired to process. Now watch this. In the second surah of the Quran, verse 32, we see an almost identical scene of intellectual humility involving the angels. When the angels question the wisdom of creating humanity, predicting that humans will cause chaos and bloodshed, God simply replies, "I know that which you do not know." The angels immediately retreat into humility, stating, "Exalted are you, we have no knowledge except what you have taught us. Indeed, it is you who is the knowing, the wise." When you layer these two texts over each other, a unified definition of wisdom emerges. In our culture, we think wisdom is something you earn. It's a PhD, it's a high IQ. But in these scriptures, wisdom is something you are granted. This is a massive paradigm shift for the modern mind. We're obsessed with the self-made man. But these texts argue that there is no such thing as self-made knowledge. There is only the source and the recipients. It suggests that true intelligence isn't about knowing all the answers. It's about recognizing the limit of your own CPU compared to the supercomputer that wrote the code. But this creates a terrifying problem. If God's wisdom is so high above us, does He actually care about the tiny details? Does a being who designed the galaxy have the bandwidth to care about your specific problems? Well, here's where it gets uncomfortable. The all-knowing isn't just looking at the stars. He's looking at the synapses in your brain. We live in a world of curation. We carefully edit our Instagram captions. We polish our LinkedIn profiles. We have a work self, a home self, and a Sunday morning self. We are experts at image management because we know that human beings judge us by what they can see. But both Christianity and Islam argue that this image management is completely futile before the divine. They describe an all-knowing wisdom that bypasses the avatar and reads the source code of the human heart directly. It suggests that God is the only being in the universe you cannot lie to. In the first book of Samuel, chapter 16, verse 7, the prophet Samuel is trying to choose a new king based on height and good looks. But God stops him and establishes a new metric. The Lord does not look at the things people look at. People look at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. The Hebrew perspective here splits reality into two layers: the mare, the outward sight, and the lev, the inner heart. The text is saying that human wisdom stops at the water's edge of the skin, but divine wisdom scans the subconscious depths that even we don't fully understand. Now watch the Quran issue a direct challenge to the human need for secrecy in Surah 67, verse 13, and conceal your speech or publicize it. Indeed, he is knowing of that within the breasts. The Arabic phrase used here, Alamun by Daddy's Sudur, is incredibly precise. It refers to the owner of the chest. It implies that God doesn't just know what you say. He knows the fleeting thoughts, the hidden jealousies, and the quiet anxieties that are locked inside your chest cavity. When you synthesize these two texts, you're left with a terrifying level of transparency. For the modern person obsessed with privacy and encryption, this is a shock. We assume our thoughts are a safe space. But these scriptures argue that the black box of the mind has a glass wall. This kills hypocrisy. It means you cannot fake your way into righteousness. You can fool the voter. You can fool the customer. You can even fool your spouse. But you cannot fool the wisdom that designed the brain you're using to formulate the lie. But this raises a difficult question. If God knows us better than we know ourselves, and if he knows our flaws, our weaknesses, and our propensity to mess things up, why does he trust us with the future? Does his all-knowing nature mean that the future is already written? Or do we have a say in it? We are obsessed with control. We buy insurance. We make 5-year plans. We obsess over the stock market. The modern human experience is defined by the anxiety of the unknown. We're terrified because we don't know what's going to happen next Tuesday, let alone next year. But both Christianity and Islam argue that while we're stressing over the variables, the all-knowing has already solved the equation. They describe a wisdom that doesn't just watch history unfold. It wrote the outline before the ink was even wet. The book of Isaiah, chapter 46, verse 10 describes God's relationship with time not as an observer, but as an author. I make known the end from the beginning, from ancient times, what is still to come. I say, my purpose will stand and I will do all that I please. This is a profound claim. It suggests that God is not reacting to breaking news. He isn't surprised by a pandemic, a war, or a stock market crash. He stands at the end and looks back at the beginning. He sees the parade from the roof while we're stuck in the street. Now watch the Quran describe this preordained knowledge with the concept of a master record in Surah 57, verse 22. No disaster strikes upon the earth or among yourselves except that it is in a register before we bring it into being. Indeed that, for Allah, is easy. In Islamic theology, this is al-Law al-Mahfuz, the preserved tablet. It implies that every joy, every tragedy, and every twist of fate was known, cataloged, and permitted by supreme wisdom before the universe even began expanding. Here's a scientific fact that puts this level of knowing into perspective. In 1961, mathematician Edward Lorenz discovered the butterfly effect. He found that in a complex system like the weather, a butterfly flapping its wings in Brazil could theoretically set off a tornado in Texas weeks later. This means that to truly know the future, you can't just know the big stuff. You have to know the position and trajectory of every single subatomic particle in the universe simultaneously. If you miss one variable, the whole prediction fails. So when these scriptures say God is all-knowing, they're describing a computational power that exceeds the limits of physics. They're claiming he tracks the butterfly and the tornado. So why is this comforting? Because it kills the anxiety of what if. We lay awake at night thinking, what if I lose my job? What if I get sick? These texts offer a radical reassurance. Nothing can happen to you that hasn't passed through the filter of divine wisdom first. You are not at the mercy of random chaos. You are part of a narrative that has already been proofread. But this leads to the biggest objection of all. If God knows everything, and he knew that cancer would happen or that war would start, why didn't he stop it? Is his wisdom cruel? This is the hardest question in religion. If there's an all-knowing wisdom running the universe, why is the world so messed up? We see innocent people suffer. We see natural disasters. We see injustice. And our human sense of morality screams, this isn't right. If God knew this would happen, why didn't he intervene? We confuse knowing with preventing. We assume that if God was really wise, he would design a world with zero pain. But both Christianity and Islam argue that our definition of wisdom is too small. We judge God's plan based on the single pixel we're standing on, while he's looking at the entire high-resolution image. In Genesis chapter 50, verse 20, we see the conclusion of the story of Joseph. His brothers sold him into slavery out of jealousy, a horrific act of betrayal. But decades later, after Joseph rose to power and saved Egypt from famine, he looked at his brothers and said, "You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives." Joseph realized that the human intent, malice, was woven into the divine intent, salvation. The wisdom of God used the worst action to produce the best outcome. Now watch the Quran tell a profound story in Surah 18 about the prophet Moses meeting a mysterious servant of God named Khidr, who represents divine wisdom. Khidr does 3 shocking things. He sinks a poor man's boat, he kills a young boy, and he rebuilds a collapsing wall for people who were rude to him. Moses is horrified. He questions the morality of these actions. But at the end, Khidr reveals the hidden wisdom. He sank the boat to save it from a tyrannical king who was seizing all good vessels. He killed the boy because God knew the boy would grow up to be a tyrant and cause his righteous parents immense pain. And he rebuilt the wall because beneath it was a treasure belonging to 2 orphans, and God wanted to protect it until they came of age. Moses saw the tragedy. Khidr saw the mercy. When you synthesize these stories, you get a humbling realization. We judge God's plan in real time, but his plan only makes sense in retrospect. We're reading chapter 5 and complaining about the plot, while he has already written the epilogue. For the modern viewer, this is a difficult pill to swallow. It means accepting that there are things happening in your life right now that look like disasters, but in the divine economy, they are necessary steps toward a greater good that you simply cannot see yet. It changes the question from "why is this happening to me?" to "what is the wisdom trying to teach me?" But this leads to the final question. If God is the source of all this wisdom, how do we get some of it? Both scriptures end with an almost identical instruction on how to access the wisdom of the all-knowing. And it turns out, the password is simpler than you think. In our modern university system, access to knowledge is transactional. You pay tuition, you study books, you pass tests. But both Christianity and Islam argue that divine wisdom is not transactional, it's relational. You don't get it by being smart, you get it by being humble. Proverbs chapter 9, verse 10 gives us the prerequisite for true intelligence. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and knowledge of the Holy One is understanding. The Hebrew word for fear here, yura, doesn't mean being terrified. It means awe. It means recognizing that you are small and he is big. Arrogance is a firewall against wisdom. Now watch the Quran draw a direct line between moral conduct and intellectual growth in Surah 2, verse 282. And fear Allah, and Allah teaches you, and Allah is knowing of all things. The concept here is taqwa, God consciousness. The verse implies a cause and effect relationship. You adopt the discipline of the heart, and as a direct result, you are taught. It frames wisdom not as information you hunt down, but as a light that is granted to a clean mirror. When you synthesize these 2 perspectives, you realize that the smartest person in the room isn't the one with the highest IQ. It's the one who is most aligned with the source. We think we can live however we want, selfishly, recklessly, and still possess wisdom. But these texts argue that your lifestyle affects your lens. If your lens is dirty with ego, you won't see clearly no matter how smart you are. So let's recap. We have a wisdom that exceeds human logic, a transparency that sees through our masks, an architect who wrote the script before we were born, a perspective that redeems our tragedy, and a promise that humility grants us access. When you look at the all-knowing through the lens of these two scriptures, the feeling shouldn't be paranoia. It should be relief. We live in a world where we're pressured to have an opinion on everything. We feel like we have to figure out politics, the economy, and the future of the planet all by ourselves. It's an exhausting weight to carry, but the doctrine of the all-knowing invites you to put that weight down. It reminds you that you're not the general, you're the soldier. You don't need to know the entire battle plan. You just need to trust the one who does. It allows you to look at the confusion of the modern world, admit, "I don't know," and sleep soundly at night because you know the one who does. The all-knowing isn't just a theological title. It is the ultimate cure for anxiety. If you enjoy exploring the deep connections in our shared spiritual history, make sure you're subscribed. I'll see you in the next one.